Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Brittany here. In today's video we are doing another murder mystery video. If you haven't already watched the other videos that I posted on my channel, make sure that you guys go ahead and check out all the other older posts that I have. And also, if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I don't know what you're doing, but go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you like the videos that you see here. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get straight into the video. So in today's video, we are actually going to be talking about David and Catherine Birine. And this is like a Bonnie and Clyde type of situation, and it's actually really crazy. So David and Catherine Birine abducted 5 women between the ages of 15 and 31. In the course of 5 weeks, they murdered and raped these women, all except one who escaped and got away. So first, we're actually going to talk about David Birine. So we're going to kind of talk about his past and kind of get to know Birine before we start talking about all of the crimes that he committed. Birine was born on February 16th in 1951. He was the oldest of 5 siblings. A lot of people described his family as dysfunctional, promiscuous, and oftentimes they even believed in incest. They also said that his household was very unkept. It was filthy. Both of his parents did not cook food for the children, so a lot of the times they went without food. They went without meals throughout the day. It was even said that they would leave the refrigerator door open to let the kids kind of just eat whatever in the refrigerator because they didn't want to have to worry about feeding them. And also they wanted the dogs to eat, so they just kept the fridge open so the kids were pretty much eating spoiled food throughout the day. Often said that his mother would exchange sexual favors in exchange for taxi rides, so she would need places to go, and instead of just paying the people for their service, she would have sex with them in order to prevent herself from paying them. In 1960, the Birines, David's family, decided to move to a suburb area in Perth in Australia, and that's where he met Catherine. And Catherine was at the age of 15 at the time that they both met. At 15, David decided to leave school and become an apprentice jockey at the Ascot racecourse. And so that's when people started to kind of really see his behavior for what it really was. It's because he would actually harm the horses that were at the racecourse. And I believe that's when he was pretty much let go because he was obviously harming the animals. So that was like his first act of violence. Like him harming the horses was like a sign that something obviously was not right with him. So the place that David was staying at the age of 15, it was said that he actually tried to commit his first rape. He had a stocking over his head and he attempted to rape an elderly lady, but he wasn't successful at doing it. He kind of got scared and ran off. So that was his first attempt at trying to rape someone, but he wasn't successful at doing it. By that time, he was already committed of several crimes, and he was in and out of prison for felonies, misdemeanor. He was known as a pornographic addict. He married his first wife when he was in his early 20s, and they had a daughter named Tanya. Tanya pretty much disowned David and pretty much wanted nothing to do with him. And she always said how she didn't want any kids because she like God forbid she gave birth to anyone similar to her father. Pretty much all the information I could find on David, pretty much he was a sex addict, he committed felonies, misdemeanors, he harmed horses, and he had a very rough upbringing. His mom and dad pretty much did not care about him or his siblings. So, and they were twisted as fuck too. Like they had their issues. They had incest and they were alcoholics. They were like pretty much the worst family or the worst parents to have. So that's all the information that I had on David. But now we're going to go ahead and talk about Catherine. Catherine was born May 23rd in 1951. So Catherine was just 2 years old when her mother died from giving birth to her younger brother. And then just 2 days later after her brother was born, her brother also passed away as well. So that was already crazy in the beginning of her life, just having to deal with that. So she also had a father named Harold who pretty much wanted nothing to do with Catherine. Like he wanted nothing to do with her. So he sent her off to be with her maternal grandparents. And that's pretty much where she lived, is with her grandparents. When she was a teenager, they had a custody dispute between her grandparents and her father. I'm guessing her father wanted her back again. And I believe that's kind of where Catherine had her issues with emotionally, because like she had pretty much daddy issues. Her dad wanted her, her dad didn't want her. So when she was a teenager, they had a dispute for custody with her grandparents and her dad, and her dad ended up winning the custody battle. So at the age of 12 is when Catherine actually met David. It wasn't until she turned 14 that she ended up having a full relationship with David. Catherine's dad did not want Catherine to date David anymore, because around this time when she was 14, they started to commit all kinds of crimes, and her dad just really wanted her to leave David. On June 11th, 1969, David and Catherine both pleaded guilty to 11 charges of breaking and entering, stealing about $3,000 worth of goods. So during this time, Catherine was actually placed on probation, and David was sent to serve 9 months in jail. And on July 9th of 1969, they had already committed 8 more charges of breaking and entering. So Birine was sent to 3 years in prison, and Catherine just had 4 years of probation. June 21st of 1970, David actually broke out of prison. Don't know how he did it, but he actually broke out of prison to be with Catherine. And on July 10th, they were actually charged with 53 counts. 3 counts of stealing, breaking and entering, being unlawfully on premises. So with all of that, David was sent to 6 years in prison, and then Catherine actually had to serve 6 months in prison. So with that being said, like I mentioned before, Catherine's dad begged her and pleaded with her to leave David, but she was so in love with him that she would do anything for David. And the fact that her dad did not want her to be with David, it made Catherine want to be with David even more. So it just was kind of backfiring on her father, the fact that he disapproved of David so much. So while Catherine was in prison, before she got out, a parole officer pretty much told Catherine that she needed to leave David and was trying to give her some advice about not being with him anymore. She took his advice and started to nanny for a family called the McLaughlin family. And that family is where she met Donald. She ended up marrying Donald on her 21st birthday, and they had 7 children together. Unfortunately, one of her children died at a very early age due to him playing in the driveway, and I believe it was Donald's mother was kind of leaving the driveway and didn't see the baby and pretty much ran over the baby, and he was pronounced dead. And after that, they went on and had 6 more children. So I think they just still wanted more children. So after that tragedy happened, they went on and had 6 more. So I guess Donald and Catherine weren't really in love. I really don't know why they stayed together. But in 1985, Catherine just left Donald and the children. She said, "I'm out of here. I don't want to go be with David." So she left her 6 children and her husband to go be with David. She loved that man so much that she left her whole family to go be with this guy. So David and Catherine Birine, and this is the crazy thing, Catherine's last name is not Birine, but she loved him so much that she pretty much changed her last name to Birine. They weren't even legally married, but she still changed her last name to Birine. So David and Catherine ended up getting a house together. I will put a picture of the house on the screen, but they ended up getting a house together. And in this house, David's brother ended up moving in with him and Catherine. And David's brother, which the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, David's brother was released from prison from serving 5 months for trying to have sex with his 6-year-old niece. In the reports, David's brother said that she led him on. So David's brother described David as heavily into sex. He had a pornographic sex collection that him and Catherine both kept. It was even said that he was very kinky and into kinky things. He would even have sex right next to his brother. I guess for his brother to watch. I don't know. Like I said, they believed in incest. It was even said that him and his brother would have sex together. So David had to have sex at least 4 to 5 times a day. And David's brother also said that he would numb his penis, like inject his penis with like numbing gel or some numbing shit for him to be able to last longer, and so that he didn't hurt as much when he would have sex, because that's how often he had sex, that he had to numb his penis. So the killings didn't actually start until 1986, and this is because David and Catherine were bored. Like, they were kinky with each other, they had a lot of sex, but it was at the point where they wanted to, like, you know, up the ante. They really wanted to take it up a notch, so they decided to start raping and killing other women. And it was even said that Catherine got pleasure and aroused by seeing David gag and rape other women. Like, that was her fantasy. She wanted to see those things. Catherine and David would often drive around their town to find women to pick up, to abduct. So their first victim that they found, her name was Mary Nilsson. She was 22 years old. She was a psychology major at the University of Western Australia. So she was pretty young, and she was having some car trouble one day, and so she decided to take her car to a local car shop where David worked. So she needed some new tires for her car, and David saw an opportunity to say like, oh, I have some tires at my house, they're pretty, you know, in good shape. If you don't want to spend all this money on these tires here, I have tires at my house that are pretty cheap, in good shape. Here's my number. If you want to pick up the tires, just give me a call, let me know, and you can come by and pick them up. So on October 6th of 1986, that is exactly what Mary did. She knocked on the door after giving David a call to pick up the tires. She gave David a call, and immediately when she knocked on the door, he snatched her into the house. He gagged her, chained her to the bed, and raped her repeatedly. And while he raped her, Catherine took notes on the things that he did to Mary, and she pretty much was just jotting down everything. And it was also said that before they committed these crimes, they were looking up, like, you know, how to hide a body, how to murder someone, how to hide their car, how to get rid of evidence. They were looking up things to help them pretty much commit these crimes. So Mary Nilsson was like their first victim, and they didn't know what to do. Like, they didn't know if they wanted to kill her, but they kind of felt like they had to kill her because they've already raped her and gagged her. So they was like, I mean, we already did this. We're gonna have to just see it through. So David decided to wrap a nylon cord around Mary's neck, and he pretty much strangled her to death. So they drove her body, after they strangled her with the cord, they drove her body to Glen Eagles Park. It's a national park in Australia. But they took her body to Glen Eagles National Park, where David then raped Mary one last time and stabbed her. And it said somewhere in a book he read that stabbing someone speeds up the decomposition phase of the body. So he looked up that he stabbed her, it would speed it up. I don't know, they're weird. So he stabbed her and then pretty much dug a shallow grave and buried her body. So 2 weeks had gone past after they murdered Mary, and nobody said anything. You know, they kind of laid low for 2 weeks, and then after that they were like, okay, we got away with that one. So they were like, we're gonna go ahead and try and catch our other victim. Well, their other victim was 15-year-old Susan Candy. Now, Susan was their youngest victim because she was 15 years old. So it was said that she was an outstanding student in high school, and she also lived with her parents. The Birines were cruising for some hours before they stumbled upon Susan. And when they seen her, I think she was just walking on the side of the road. I didn't see why. I don't think I even looked into why she was walking on the side of the road. But she was by herself walking, and I think what I probably read was the fact that she used to work somewhere and her dad would walk to pick her up and then they walk home together. But on this particular night, her dad wasn't there to walk her home. I think she was just tired of waiting on him, so she ended up walking herself home. So Susan was walking home. They were driving for hours when they found Susan walking, and they pretty much asked her, did she need a ride? And that's pretty much how they got all their victims. They asked them, oh, do you need a ride? We can help you. Don't fall for that shit. If anybody ever asks you for a ride that you don't know, run. Even if you do know them, run. I don't trust nobody. Like, I will walk before I ask anybody for a ride unless I really know. You have to be family. Pretty much I asked her, did she want a ride? She said yes. And so that's when she got into the car. It was that the car had no handles in the inside. Like, none. You weren't able to get out of the car. You can only get in. Scary. So scary. So Susan got into the car. And they pretty much held her at knife point. And tied her hands together. Then taken back to their home, gagged, chained to the bed, and raped several times. So after she was raped, David tried to tie the nylon cord around her neck to strangle her, but she was like fighting back. And so she was fighting so much that they forced sleeping pills down her throat to pretty much stop her from fighting. So David pretty much told Catherine to profess her undying love for him by murdering Susan. So that's exactly what she did. She complied and she killed Susan. And David watched her, every move, David watched her kill Susan. And it was later asked, why did she do whatever David told her to do? Like, why would she do that? And she pretty much said that she would go to the ends of the earth for David. She would do anything he asked her to do, anything he wanted her to do. She was so in love with this man that she killed another lady. She killed another woman for him because that's how much she loved him. And she said she felt absolutely nothing from it. She said that she thought she was going to feel like some sort of like guilt or sadness or like scared or afraid that she killed someone, but child, she felt nothing. After they murdered Susan, they buried her right next to Mary. They pretty much buried them right next to each other. So on November 1st, I saw a lady by the name of Nolene Patterson standing near her car. She was 31 years old and her car had ran out of gas and she was kind of stuck stranded on the side of the highway. They asked Nolene, hey, do you need a ride? Get in the car. And a lot of people, I'm assuming this was normal to either hitchhike or get rides from random people, because it's like a repeated pattern that was happening. So Nolene got into the car thinking that everything would be fine, because she needed a ride home. All the other victims, when she got into the car, she was held at knife point, her hands were tied, and they took her back to the house. There she was gagged, raped repeatedly, and it was even said that David formed a relationship with Nolene. I don't know why, but he did not kill her like he killed all their other victims. Typically, they killed them that same night. They didn't wait around. But it had been like 2 or 3 days, and Nolene was still alive. And Catherine's like, what are you doing? Like, this is not what we do. And so Catherine started to become very jealous of Nolene because she's like, what is this? Like, we killed them right after. And like I said, Catherine would take notes of like all of the victims that he would rape. She would just sit by the side and literally watch and take notes. So she didn't understand. She was learning from David, but she didn't understand why he kept Nolene alive so long. After 3 days of Nolene still being alive, Catherine was like, okay, either it's her or me. So she ended up grabbing a knife, putting it to her own throat, and said, either you kill her or I'll kill myself. So she gave him a pretty tough ultimatum, but he ended up killing Nolene. So David forced sleeping pills down Nolene's throat and then strangled her to death. So when they buried her body, they buried it a little further out from where they buried the other two girls. And it was said that Catherine had pleasure in kicking the sand over Nolene's face and like in her face to bury her. Like she was happy to get rid of her. So on November 5th, they abducted 21-year-old Denise Brown. And if you notice, these murders and these abductions were almost like a week apart from each other. So they abducted Denise Brown. She was 21 years old. She was standing on a nearby bus station where she was waiting on the bus to come. David and Catherine pulled up and was like, hey, do you need a ride? Denise said yes, and Denise got into the car. Like all the other victims, she was gagged, chained to the bed, and raped repeatedly. That following afternoon, after they raped her, they took her to a pine plantation. So David raped Denise again. They waited for darkness, and then they drug her body out of the car. After they drug her out of the car to the location where they were going to bury her, David then raped her again, stabbed her in the neck, and dug a shallow grave. They were so convinced that Denise was dead, and when they put her into the hole, Denise sat up, and they were like, what? And I was like, okay, they thought she was dead. So David ended up grabbing an axe. He struck her in the head 3 times to really make sure that she was dead this time. And then they buried her body. So their next and final victim would be Kate Moore. Now, Kate was the one who got away. So with Kate's story, Kate again decided to accept a ride from the Birines. And it was said that after she accepted the ride, she was held at knife point, her hands were tied, and they told her to pretty much lay down in the back of the car, and they put a blanket over her head. Well, Kate actually slept in the same bed with David and Catherine, and she was handcuffed to David the whole time they were sleeping. She would smoke weed with them. She would watch movies with them. She would dance with them. They had like a favorite song that they would play and that she would dance. So she pretty much befriended the Birines in efforts to escape. Just to prove that she was okay, because she had been gone for so long, the Birines told Kate to call her family and pretty much say like, oh, I'm at a friend's house, I got drunk, and I'm okay. And in her efforts of saying like, oh, I was drunk and I'm staying late at a friend's house, her family knew she didn't drink. So they're like, she's lying, this is not Kate. Somebody is telling her to say these things because she's not a drinker. So on November 10th of 1986, David had to go to work because, like I mentioned, he worked at a car shop. So David ended up going to work, and Catherine stayed home with Kate. And so Catherine often sold cocaine and weed out of their house. And so one day they did not chain Kate. They always chained all of their victims up to the bed or somewhere so that they couldn't, escape. And on this particular day, they were such good friends with Kate Child, they forgot to handcuff her. So when Catherine was doing her drug deal, she's like, hey, Kate, you go upstairs. I got to handle some business. So while she's doing her drug deal, Kate is like, this will be the perfect time to escape. Like, I got to get the fuck up out of here. So she ended up breaking a window, jumping out of the window, and running like for her fucking life. When I tell you, she like literally ran until she found a nearby laundromat where she was literally like shooken up, and she's like, we need to call the police. I was raped. I was kidnapped. And that's how they called the Birines. So when the police arrived, Kate pretty much told the police everything. And the Birines went under a different alias. Like, they didn't have the names that they went by, which was David and Catherine. They went by something completely different. But Kate knew their real names because it was like written on prescription bottles. So she was like, okay, his name is actually really David and her name is really actually Catherine. So she knew their real names and everything. The police ended up going to the house that Kate said that she left from. And Catherine, for the most part, was like, I don't know who you're talking about. Like, I've never seen this girl. I've never heard of this girl in my life. I don't know who Kate is. She pretty much acted like she never knew her. But it was funny because they questioned David, and David said he knew who Kate was. And David said that Kate would come over to have consensual sex and that it was nothing. So, do you know her or do you not? So David was sent to trial, of course, as he should have been, and he pleaded guilty to 4 counts of murder and 1 count of abduction and rape. And when he was asked why is he pleading guilty, he looked over to the families of the victims and was like, I mean, it's the least I could do. So then David was then sent to serve 4 terms of life imprisonment, and so was Catherine. They both were sent to serve 4 terms life imprisonment without parole. They're not getting out. They said these fucking people aren't going to get out until they're like senile and fragile. They have to be like over 100 years old, literally bones like achy, before they're getting out of prison. And David was sent to Fremantle prison. It was a maximum security prison, of course. And there he got his ass beat. When I tell you, he got his ass whooped in prison. It was so bad that they had to move him to solitary confinement. Like, he had to be away from everyone else because of how bad they were beating him up. Over the course of a year of them both being in prison, it was said that they wrote over 2,600 letters to each other. And then one day, Catherine wanted nothing to do with Birine. Like, she was like, I'm done talking to you. And she was not returning his letters anymore. She just quit fucking talking to him out of nowhere. How do you do all of this and then just quit talking to somebody? Like, you quit talking to them now when you could have quit talking to them before you start doing all this goofy ass shit? Child. In 2005, on October 7th, Birine was found dead in his prison. He was 54 years old and he hung himself in his cell. Peace out, Birine. I mean, I would never want nobody to commit suicide. I think that's very sad, and I'm not even trying to make fun of that situation at all. But the fact that we have one less bad person in this world, it's a good thing. It was said the reason why that he killed himself was because he was actually suffering from depression, and they weren't giving him his antidepressant medication. And since he wasn't getting his medication, he committed suicide because he was in such a big depression. I don't know why he was in depression. I don't know if it was because Catherine cut off all ties with him, or if it was because he realized what he did was wrong, but I don't know. It was even said that he sexually assaulted another prisoner at the facility. So I don't know if he really learned his lesson or not. I'm not even sure, because he was still doing the goofy shit when he got into prison. And after David passed away, Catherine was denied being able to go to David's funeral. Also, her husband that she left at an early age, he died as well while she was in prison. I think he died at the age of 59. I don't know how he passed away either. But Catherine was also denied being able to go to Donald's funeral as well. So they pretty much told her, you're not leaving out of here. You're not going nowhere. So they didn't really say much about Catherine's experience in prison, but she is now the prison librarian. So I'm guessing she's trying to turn over a new leaf. But she's known as being that bitch in prison. Like, she's that chick who did all of these. I mean, she didn't really, she did murder Denise, but she didn't murder any of the other victims or rape them. She was just pretty much an accomplice, and she was pretty much like the mastermind behind everything. But she was pretty much known in prison as that girl, because this was such a huge story that everyone knew about it. So everybody in prison knew exactly who she was, and she became the prison librarian, and still to this day she is the librarian at the prison in Australia. On March 14, 2009, she wanted her case to be reviewed. She's like, get me up out of here. But after reviewing her case and speaking to the families of the victims, they're like, No, she's going to stay in there for life. We weren't playing. Like, she's going to be in there for life. So in 2017, Birine's son, Peter, pretty much called for Catherine to be executed. But I believe she wasn't executed just because I think the death penalty was like abolished a few years before she got into prison. So she got lucky. But pretty much his son, Peter, was being like assaulted and bullied because of that's who his father was, and he hated that. Like, that is just the worst. You can't help who your parents are. But yeah, he wanted Catherine to be executed, but I mean, it was like abolished a few years ago, that law. So Catherine got lucky, but Catherine is still in prison to this day. She is still alive, child. She is 70 years old. Think about her being 70. I have an aunt that's in her 70s. Like, this story wasn't like it was years ago. I mean, they were born in 1951, but they were committing crimes in 1986, 1985. Like, these crimes, I was born in 93, honey. Like, child, it's scary. It could literally happen to anybody. Literally happen to anybody. Anyway, that is the story of David and Catherine Birine. If you guys like these kinds of stories, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I don't know what you're doing, but if you got this far into the video, you might as well subscribe. I mean, I don't know what you're waiting on. Anyway, I will see you guys in my next video. Be looking out for another murder mystery video or just some weird, bizarre story. And I will see you guys in my next video. I love you guys all. Bye.